Hey you guys, welcome to the final week of the month, which is always a special time on this channel because guess what? It's style study time. And honestly, this series has just turned into Srish's selfish time because today we're going to take a look at yet another artist that is one of my personal favorites. There is a ton you'll learn from their work, I promise, because today we're taking a look at the incredible, super stylized illustrations of one of my favorite artists, Yoshi Yoshitani. Now, fun fact, I actually found their work through this tarot deck. They made a tarot deck called Tarot of the Divine, and I swear to God, this deck literally stalked me until I finally got it, and I love it so much. I love every illustration in this, and when I found out that they have an IG and all of that cool art stuff that people put online, I knew I was instantly in love. So this is definitely an intimidating study because not only is their work so beautiful and just so inspiring, but their work has literally led to so much, spiritual growth and deep healing in my personal life as well. And so for that reason, I don't want to do a below average job on doing two separate paintings because there is so much intricacy in their work. So today I decided we're not going to do a part 3 and instead I want to focus all of my strength into doing a really good job with the study itself. If you're new here and this is your very first style study, hi, I'm Srish and I'm so glad you're here. Style study is a regular series we do here on my channel where we take a look at some of our favorite contemporary artists, analyze their work and see what we can learn from it. Keyword, learn. We're not here to plagiarize anyone's work or copy their style, we're only here to learn some cool art tips and tricks and see how we can apply them to finding our own unique art style. Today's video is going to be structured in two parts. In part 1, we'll take a look at Yoshi's work, analyze their style and see what we can learn from it. And in part 2, we'll do a study of one of their original paintings. The beautiful reference I've chosen today is this one. If you enjoyed this video and learned something today, please do remember to like and subscribe. Comment below your biggest takeaway from this study. And without much further ado, if you're ready, grab a snack, sit back, and let's dive into another style study featuring Yoshi Yoshitani. Yoshi Yoshitani is an illustrator, author, and Eisner Award nominee based in California. Being mixed race, they've said in interviews how they felt like they didn't fit into a community and how this drives messages of inclusivity and cultural diversity in their art. Yoshi has worked on many projects through their career, the chief of all being, of course, the 78-card tarot deck. And they seem to currently have an oracle deck in the works, which best believe I'm getting my grubby paws on the second it's available. However, they have previously worked on graphic novels as well as on projects with big corporations like Disney, DC, DreamWorks, and Netflix, among others. Their incredibly unique art has garnered them over 82,000 followers on Instagram and over 72,000 followers on Twitter. As you can tell, a lot of Yoshi's art is very deeply rooted in mythologies and folklore from all over the world. This was also the most powerful thing that I've learned from the tarot deck, by the way, is this deep respect that Yoshi has for peoples and their ancient stories. The amount of research that they put into each piece is absolutely astounding. However, that is not something that I can break down for you because obviously that is just who they are as a person. What we can look at today is the incredibly stylized illustrations themselves and how Yoshi uses some very fundamental art principles to create some very advanced pieces. But of course, there is always that beautiful undercurrent of fairy tales and legends that you'll see in all the details and carefully chosen design elements in each painting. Because at the very core of it, Yoshi's art is very symbolist. Speaking of lists, here are 4 key characteristics to Yoshi's art. Okay, I did not realize just how powerful the color palettes are in Yoshi's work until I painted the study for this video. Yes, I know Yoshi makes it a point to post their color palette with a lot of paintings, and I feel dumb looking back, but you guys, I thought the color palettes were a general guideline. But oh my god, so many of the colors in their work are repeated across several elements. Like here in this painting, where the color at the base of the terrarium is the same red as in the wings, and the greens in the succulents and cactus are also pretty much exactly color matched to the wings. Or here, where the sleeves, the roosters, and the circle in the sun have the same shade of red. When Yoshi picks a palette, apart from a few value variations, they stick to the palette. In fact, even if there are value variations, you'll see the varied colors replicated in several parts of the painting. So in this painting, where you see several variations of the reds in the wings, you'll see the same colors also replicated in the collar. Here, the greens in the wings are the greens in the foliage and rocks, are the greens in the hair and the fins. It is this feeling of cohesion. This repetition creates a beautiful sense of rhythm across the piece, which is actually a theme that we'll come back to a little later in the video. The colors themselves are often complementary for the simpler pieces, so reds and greens here where the background is pretty flat, or the oranges and blues here where the only elements in the piece are the character and a hermit crab. With the more complex paintings though, we start to see a bit of split complementary or tetrad action. So here we have reds, greens, oranges and blues, whereas here we see a teal opposed by reds, yellows and oranges. So more complexity of color with complexity of design. However, I also feel like the color palette adds a lot of sophistication to their art. With a style like this, which is very story-based, has very flat shades, and little to no influence from any dramatic lighting per se, it is easy for the piece to look very children's illustration-y, or for the lack of a better word, juvenile. However, by controlling the color palette so tightly and limiting the colors that they've chosen, Yoshi is actually able to create an incredible sense of maturity in their work. It is the textbook definition of doing more with less, and it never even occurred to me that actually using fewer hues might actually add more complexity. The other very important aspect to Yoshi's work is their use of shape language. More specifically, the way they use shapes to tell a story. Let's first look at character silhouettes, aka the one thing that I always forget to think about while creating compositions. There's a couple of silhouette aspects I want to bring your attention to today. The first is the interplay of larger and smaller shapes and how they tell the story. I find that Yoshi tends to depict stable or obstinate characters as very bottom heavy, while the more dynamic or impulsive characters tend to be top heavy. So with this illustration for the Empress card, the Empress is ruled by Taurus, which is arguably the most stable fixed sign in the zodiac, and so her silhouette here is very square, but also very definitely wider at the bottom than at the top. So like she wouldn't topple over quite easily. In stark contrast is this illustration for the Nine of Swords, which often symbolizes severe anxiety and fear, aka the least mentally stable that I've ever felt personally. And so very aptly, Yoshi has painted this character to be much wider at the top, slightly less wide in the middle where the knees are, but definitely very narrow at the bottom, where it looks like the character's entire weight is balanced on a single toe. If you tipped her over, she would topple really easily, thereby echoing that feeling of instability. The second aspect of the silhouette is the actual rendering of the silhouette elements. You'll find that parts of the silhouette that stand out from the background are deliberately painted to contrast it, while other parts are deliberately painted to fade into the background, and even this is part of the story. So in this piece, you'll see that while the skin and tail of the character seem to blend into the background, their hair and fins stand out as much higher contrast. Maybe this character comes from a place where everyone around them has the same features, but it is how they accessorize that makes them stand out. In a metaphorical sense, it may be their own choices that separate them from the rest of the community. On the contrary, this character's hair and fins seem to blend into the background while their actual skin stands out. Maybe this character lives in a world where there is no one else like them. Perhaps this character feels like they stick out like a sore thumb and wishes that they fit in more. See how shifting the contrast between the silhouette and the background can change the entire narrative? Alrighty, let's now talk about one of my favorite parts about Yoshi's art, and that is the interplay of visually loud and quiet zones. If you've watched style studies before, you know that I can't help but mention visual noise in art. It is just something I notice, and if I've seen it, you're gonna see it. That is just how this friendship works, I'm sorry. But in a lot of Yoshi's work, I noticed that there is a concentric sandwich effect going on with the visual noise. Starting on the outside, you'll see that the background is often a flat zone, usually only has one single color or very low contrast with multiple colors. Moving inwards, the midground elements, and sometimes even some foreground elements, will have lots of details, and more details equals more visual noise. So here, as you can see, there is a lot of texture in the planet, on her armor, even in the seat. Here, the noisy details are in the long, fluttery wings, the collar, and even the crown. However, what completes the sandwich is the next quiet zone, which is almost always flat skin. So if you look at this character, the skin is literally two flat shapes that stand out against the red, and flat shapes equals visually quiet zones. Here, although the skin has some detailing, it's pretty much all low contrast, which still keeps it a visually quiet zone. So do you see this concentric effect of a visually quiet background, then a visually noisy midground and foreground, and then nestled inside it is the visually quiet skin? It almost feels like the visual noise creates a sort of frame that not only pushes the skin as the focal element, but also separates the character from the background. Of course, the visual noise is where all the storytelling elements lie, such as plants or clothing and jewelry, or even detailed hair. Perhaps the skin, then being the quiet focal zone, speaks to a sense of inner peace despite the chaos and chatter of the outer world. I never actually thought of that. Wow, so this video just turned into an entire lesson on composition. But the final point I want to mention today is Yoshi's use of symmetry. Now, this applies more to the more heavily detailed pieces, just because there are more elements to play with, but I noticed that Yoshi often paints a lot of symmetry in their work, but it is also asymmetrical. Now, this is something you would observe in both the backgrounds and the characters. So here, for instance, the background elements are pretty much exactly mirrored horizontally. The elements around the keyhole frame thing are the same on either side. However, look at the fence elements. The shapes are perfectly mirrored, sure, but the layer seems to have been offset. So it's symmetrical within the layer, but as a painting, the symmetry isn't perfect. Here's another piece where the background is symmetrical, but at first glance, so is the character. However, the arms are not perfectly symmetrical, and the clothing lends itself to so many little asymmetrical details. It is subtle, but it is there. Now, why would Yoshi even use symmetry if they then also destroy it in subtle ways? Well, my best guess is that it induces a feeling of calm. As humans, we find symmetry very soothing. There is something so incredibly satisfying about an image where two halves are exact mirrors of each other. However, as an artist, our primary goal is to always keep the viewer engaged in our painting long enough for them to create an emotional bond with it. And with perfectly symmetrical images, we risk the viewer getting bored and moving on, because if you've seen one half of the image, you've seen it all really. So by adding little hints of asymmetry, what Yoshi is actually doing is disrupting that boredom, thereby getting the viewer even more deeply invested in the painting. This is also an effect you'll notice when it comes to the rhythm in our work. The rhythm in a painting is guided by how quickly your eye moves around a piece and in what order. Rhythm is what keeps your viewer engaged in a painting and helps them notice all of the elements that you've so painstakingly painted into a piece. Looking at Yoshi's work, you'll see that a lot of rhythm comes from repetition. We saw this with the color palette, which is a more subconscious repetition for us as the viewers, but there are some more obvious elements that are deliberately repeated. In this judgment card, for instance, you have repetition among the mountains, which lead your eye into the background and up to the lotus, but you also have the swirly clouds, which lead you to the lotus on top and towards the mountains at the bottom. It's not the exact same shapes repeated, there are variations in the sizes and details, but it still works to take you from one element to the next in a specific rhythm. This is such a masterful skill to add this type of repetition without it getting dull or overcrowded. It's probably going to take me years to learn what Yoshi seems to do so effortlessly. So to sum up part 1, here are 4 key characteristics to Yoshi's art. Number 1, the color palette is tightly controlled and involves a lot of repetition, which adds a subtle sense of rhythm and a lot of sophistication to each painting. 2, the character silhouette is used as a very important storytelling element, but the shape indicates their emotional state, while the contrast of the silhouette against the background may tell us a little about the character's motives. Number 3, there is a concentric sandwich compositional effect where the background and the character's skin seem to be the visually quiet zones, while the visually noisy elements lie between the two, framing the skin and separating it from the background. And number 4, the use of partial symmetry helps the painting look soothing but not boring, and Yoshi uses a lot of repetition to guide the viewer's eye through the rhythm of each painting. For our study today, this is the reference that I've chosen. It is the Hear No Evil piece that Yoshi did a while back, and it has pretty much got all of the elements that we looked at in part 1, so it felt like the perfect fit today. As usual, I started with a sketch and straight away realized that this was going to be an interesting one to sketch out because it has some line art but not everywhere. So you'll see me struggle a little with trying to figure out which lines to actually ink and which ones are just kind of edges that you select and fill in. The background for me was the most intimidating part. It looks simple and repetitive, but my main concern was not getting the shapes and sizes right and it messing up the rhythm of the piece. Now, full disclosure, I didn't get it exactly right, but I tried my best, so hopefully that's good enough. I did a second refined sketch and then lowered the opacity and inked in only the lines that were visible. I started with black and then colored over them as I went through the painting. I did have to do a lot of liquify as we progressed through the painting though, mostly because it is kind of hard to just guess where the lines and features are in something so heavily stylized. But anyway, after spending quite a while getting the foundations right, it was time to color. Now, for me, personally, the coloring itself was actually a pretty fast process. When I'm doing a study for this series, I like to start by color matching the big element by bringing the Pure Rough window right on my canvas and playing with the color wheel until I get the perfect match. I find this gives me a good idea of where to start, and it's literally only something I do for this series just because I want to match the original as best as I can. What I found really interesting, however, was the color repetition. Like I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, while painting this study is when it hit me just how repetitive the colors are in Yoshi's work. So the dark green of the hair is the same color as we use in the branches in the background. The shadow tone under the neck is the same as in the nose, and it is the same color that we airbrush in the cheeks and the inner eye socket, and also in some of the flowers on the headphones. This study was also an exercise in working smarter, not harder, because a lot of the details like the hanging triangles or the 3 little spokes coming out of the hair are all repetitive. So I genuinely just copy pasted them into place and saved a ton of time. Now, I don't know if Yoshi drew the flower tattoos and the flowers on the headphones by hand, which they probably did, and it felt like a breeze, but look, I drew it by hand, and this was a solid reminder of why I don't draw flowers. It was difficult and confusing and scary and imbalanced, and I wanted to scream and cry, and I just really need a hug, okay? Because look how ugly they turned out, oh my god. But hey, at least the repetition helped, because I only had to do one decent looking one and then just copy paste it a bunch of times, so small mercies. Please don't comment below how ugly they look because I will cry, thank you. And the final repetitive element was the background details in the trees, which was much easier because all I had to do were little flicks of the brush. All in all, I really love how this study turned out, and there's definitely aspects of it that I will be incorporating into my own style, especially the colors and the repetition. Not the flowers, oh god, never the flowers. But yeah, what do you guys think? And there we have it, Yoshi Yoshitani demystified. Well, as much as they can be demystified based on just this one video, but there is so much you can still learn from them, I promise. So I will leave links to their work down in the description. Make sure you go check them out and show them some love for me. If you enjoyed this video and learned something today, please do remember to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out so much. And if you want to come say hi, I have links to my Discord and Instagram down in the description below. My custom brush pack is now available on Gumroad, and I'll leave a link to that up here and down in the description below. They're all really good, really high quality brushes that I made from scratch. So if you want to grab yourself a cool new brush pack that will make your life a lot easier, make sure you go check it out, and it will support this channel a lot. So thank you so much for your support. But yeah, what was your biggest takeaway from this study? Are there any other artists you'd like to see a style study on in the future? First, check out my style study playlist. I'll leave it down here in the outro. We've done a ton of these, and chances are we've covered some of your favorites on this series already, but in case I haven't, feel free to comment below or come tell me on my Discord channel and I will add them to my ever-growing list. But yeah, that's about all I have to say today, so thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I really hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Check out some more style studies down here, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye!